Welcome to the show. I am your host, Mr. B. Today we have a very exciting show for you. We are talking about the latest developments in the Iran war. What's been happening? Apparently, there's some peace proposals submitted by Iran, and the U.S. is sort of negotiating back and forth, but nothing has come of it yet. There's still this blockade. The U.S.'s plan is really to try to starve the Iranians out, and everything's kind of on edge right now. But more importantly, there's a story out that the UAE is quitting OPEC. Shocking, but this was the likely outcome of this situation given the immense pressure that they're under. So let's jump into that and learn more about it from our news source, First Post, a publication based out of India.
Tensions between Iran and the United States have resulted in threats and attacks against vessels in the waterway. Usually, despite differences, the oil cartel has sought to show a united front. However, the UAE exit from OPEC also represents a big win for US President Donald Trump, who has accused the organization of ripping off the rest of the world by inflating oil prices. The US president has also linked American military support for the Gulf with the oil prices. Earlier, the UAE, Washington's most important ally in the region and a key business hub, also criticized fellow Arab states for not doing enough to protect it from numerous Iranian attacks during ongoing conflicts. Now, with the UAE's departure, how will the markets react? What impact will this have on oil prices? The next few days will reveal. In Washington, a glamorous dinner over the weekend turned into a security scare. I'm talking about the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Gunfire erupted outside the ballroom. Inside were some of America's most powerful people. President Donald Trump was there. So was Vice President J.D. Vance, along with senior lawmakers and cabinet members. Within minutes, the night became more than a security story. It became a question of succession. What if the United States president hadn't gotten so lucky that night? Who would have run the United States? And was Washington fully prepared for such a scenario? Here's a report.
Reid Hoffman has been right about every single tech trend for the past 25 years, and he says the way we use AI is about to change forever. And this...
Nearby are the vice president, senior lawmakers, and key cabinet officials. In an instant, America faced a question usually reserved for disaster movies. If that room had been struck, who would take charge as the commander-in-chief? This is what happened at the White House Correspondents' Association dinner on Saturday night. Donald Trump was attending the annual gala at the Washington Hilton Hotel. The event is one of the capital's most visible social gatherings. It usually blends politics, media, and celebrity culture. But then the night was interrupted by gunfire at the hotel. Security teams reacted at once. Senior figures were rushed away. And the suspect was later charged with attempting to assassinate the president. What turned this into a constitutional story was the seating chart. Trump was present. So was Vice President J.D. Vance. House Speaker Mike Johnson was also there. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was also in attendance. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was in the ballroom as well, and so was Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. That placed almost all the top names in the presidential succession order under one roof. The succession order is the country's continuity plan. It decides who assumes the presidency if the office holder dies, resigns, or cannot serve. The vice president always comes first. The House Speaker is next. Then there is the Senate President pro tempore. This is a senior senator who can preside over the Senate. After that, cabinet secretaries follow in a fixed order. On Saturday, only one of the top 8 was absent, and that was Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa. He currently serves as Senate President pro tempore. That makes him third in line after Vance and Johnson. Grassley, aged 92, was recovering from a surgery and remained in Iowa. But it appears he was not the only one sitting out. Several other officials also missed the dinner. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was not there. It was also unclear whether Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rowlands attended. Those absences explain why a key safeguard was never activated. It is called the designated survivor. He or she is a cabinet member who skips a major gathering. That official then is moved to a secure, undisclosed location. If catastrophe wipes out the assembled leadership, an eligible successor remains alive and available to run the administration. The practice is most associated with the State of the Union address in the US. During that speech, presidents, lawmakers, judges, and military leaders often gather in one chamber. To reduce risk, one qualified cabinet secretary stays away. For this year's address in February, Trump chose Veterans Affairs Secretary Doug Collins as the designated survivor, but no such arrangement was made for Saturday's dinner.
There were several members of the cabinet in the line of succession who did not attend for various personal reasons. So designating one survivor was not necessary, as we had several members who were not there already.
This kind of planning is not limited to the United States. Britain has its own version of the same logic. Direct heirs to the throne traditionally avoid traveling together. That is why senior royals are often expected to fly separately. The purpose is simple. One accident should not throw the monarchy into a crisis. Different countries use different systems, but all prepare for the same nightmare scenario. When power is concentrated among a few people, their safety becomes a matter of national continuity. Saturday night was a sharp reminder of how quickly that can be tested.
I do want to weigh in on the last story that we heard. This weekend, for those who haven't followed along, there was an assassination attempt on President Trump's life. I think this marks the third, if not the fourth, of such attempts. And unfortunately, it is true that all his successors, or most of them, were already in that building. So had it been something big that potentially wiped everybody out, it is true that the country would be exposed in terms of a leadership gap. Fortunately, that wasn't the case. But it does highlight the need to ensure that there are proper contingency plans set up by the government to ensure that there's always a successor in place for leadership. That being said, we live in very troubled times, and that's why prayer is necessary for our leaders. Obviously, President Trump is making some decisions that some people don't agree with. But I don't think, it ever justifies anyone going out on limbs to try to take the man out. That seems a bit extreme. One thing I find quite interesting is despite all these attempts on this man's life, we never hear anything else about it. We never really hear anything about the people who made the attempt. There doesn't seem to be any sort of major investigation to uncover what's going on. And I think that's a little fishy. But, hopefully he's well guarded and there isn't a scenario where he is, unable to serve out his full term. All right.
For decades, the American dream was the gold standard for millions of Indians, a promise of world-class education, high-paying tech jobs, global exposure, and a shot at generational wealth. But now, that dream is beginning to lose its shine. A growing number of non-resident Indians are no longer just chasing foreign citizenship, they are betting on building in India. Take Sridhar Vembu, for example, the Zoho co-founder, has sparked a nationwide debate after urging Indians living in the United States to seriously consider returning home. In an open letter to Indians in the United States, Vembu has said, India does not just need their remittances, it needs their talent. Wembu, who has himself returned to India from the United States, transformed Zoho into a global software as a service powerhouse. And he did it from rural Tamil Nadu. He argues that India's startup, research and development, and manufacturing ecosystems now provide opportunities that were not available even a decade ago. He wants skilled Indians to return and help strengthen India's technology sector, especially at a time when AI, deep tech, and domestic innovation are dramatically reshaping the future, right here in India. But not everyone is convinced. Others, like entrepreneur Ashneer Grover, are far more skeptical. Grover, in fact, has called the idea delulu. Now, that's the Gen Z word for delusional. He argues this vision is idealistic, even unrealistic, and remarked how record-breaking heat in India is clearly making people dizzy. But his skepticism and Wembu's open letter have now sparked a bigger debate across social media, triggering strong responses from Indians, both at home and abroad. Some said that his message was a timely reminder that India's rise cannot depend on remittances alone, but on talent returning home to build, innovate, and contribute directly to the country's growth. So those who side with Wembu see his open letter appeal as patriotic, aspirational, and aligned with India's long-term national priorities. Those who don't agree with him call him a realist, arguing that nationalism alone cannot override practical realities. Most Indians on social media have pointed out how before India can expect large numbers of global professionals to return, it must first address infrastructure. So they're calling Ashneer Grover here the realist. They want the work culture, pollution, public services, and quality of life to be addressed first. But beyond the social media noise, what does the data suggest? So far, it is compelling. According to a 2026 survey by Carnegie and YouGov, 14% Indian American adults said they frequently think about leaving the United States. 26% said they think about it occasionally. So yes, Indians in America are reassessing their lives abroad. And in some cases, they are coming back. But not for one single reason, for many. Let's start with immigration. Over 1 million Indians remain stuck in green card backlogs with waits that can stretch for decades. H-1B visas too are facing higher costs and rising uncertainty. Add to that tech layoffs, a 60-day deadline to find new work or leave, sky-high living costs from housing to healthcare. And it's not just economics. For many people, it is also the dismal political climate and a growing sense of not fully belonging. Increasingly, Indian immigrants and Indian Americans, or as a matter of fact, anyone perceived as Indian, have become the latest target of a growing anti-migrant movement. In October 2025 alone, the Center for the Study for Organized Hate documented nearly 2,700 posts promoting racism against Indians and Indian Americans. All this is forcing Indian Americans to ask, is the American dream still worth it? Returning to India comes with its own set of trade-offs. For those who do return, the challenge is often not just professional, but personal. For their children, it can mean adapting to a completely different education system. For their spouses, it may mean rebuilding careers, communities, and daily life. So the reverse brain drain that Sridhar Wembu envisions may not be as simple as swift as a social media open letter. Because for millions of Indians in the United States, this is not just a career decision. It's a life decision. For some, America still represents opportunity. For others, India represents possibility. And that may be the real story here. This is not necessarily the end of the American dream, but perhaps the rise of an Indian one. So as that debate over Sridhar Wembu's appeal continues, the story, it appears, is no longer about whether India needs its diaspora, but whether the diaspora now needs India. Earlier, I spoke to entrepreneur and author Vivek Wadhwa, who says this premise is outdated and also warns that the American dream is losing its edge. Listen to this. We have Mr. Wadhwa with us. Mr. Wadhwa, thank you so much for joining me on First Post.
It's good to be on with you.
All right, so let me get right into this. You've written about this in detail as well. I want to first understand your core view on this. How do you view this appeal?
Well, you see, I'm an American myself, an Indian American myself, and I've also been researching this topic for the past 20, 25 years. I researched the immigrant entrepreneurship in Silicon Valley, and I documented that more than half the companies here were being started by immigrants, and that Indians were the dominant group. And then we updated the research about 7, 8 years later, and we found that the immigrant entrepreneurship was dropping because of flawed immigration policies, and people were returning home in droves. I wrote a book called The Immigrant Exodus, which predicted that with the flawed US immigration policies, India and China entrepreneurship would be rising. They're going to become R&D superpowers. And that's exactly what's happening. So now the question that Sridhar, my friend, I knew Sridhar when he was here in Silicon Valley. So we go back a long way. Now, he came here in a different era. He came here when India was socialist.
When life feels like a stretch,
India now is a land of opportunity. The economy is booming. The cities are now have beautiful infrastructure. Some of them do in some parts. If you're upper middle class or upper class, you can live a better lifestyle than you can live in the United States. Here, we have to clean our own bathrooms. We have to cook our own food. We have to wash our own clothes. We don't have servants. We don't have drivers. You have all of those luxuries in India. So if you're now an innovator and you're looking for market opportunity, India is the place. If you want to live a comfortable lifestyle, India is the place. If you want culture and values, India is the place. So this is what the theme of my response to Sridhar was.
You've also warned that if the United States risks decline, it will be because it turns its back on global talent. In that context, is the American dream losing its edge?
Yes, it's losing its edge. And this is why I worry a lot about these new policies, about this anti-immigrant sentiment over here. Because, at this stage, when you have China now rising so rapidly, they're dominating robotics, they're dominating artificial intelligence, they're dominating even mobile technologies and so on. And so manufacturing, they already own it. Well, America needs to compete. They need to be able to build world-changing technologies. And unless they can get the talent that India has, what's going to happen is that people are going to do what I'm doing. They're going to build the R&D in India. Now, it's wonderful for India. I mean, don't get me wrong here. But the fact is that America loses. So the jobs I created right now are largely in India. And then when I bring the technology here, I'm going to disrupt the American industry because it is such revolutionary medical diagnostics technology that I'm going to now shake up the big companies over here. Well, from an American point of view, it would have been better if I had built this technology in Silicon Valley. So it's a loss for America. And why did I have to do that? If this was 15, 20 years ago, if I didn't have the talent, I would simply have hired the engineers in India and brought them to the United States. I can't do that because there aren't H-1B visas available. And if they come here, then people are stranded in immigration limbo, and they have to deal with the type of criticism that we talked about earlier. So America is shooting itself in the foot here. This is sheer stupidity. They're destroying their own competitiveness at a time when it matters the most.
And then he made this joke about First Lady Melania Trump. He said Melania has a glow like, and I'm quoting him here, an expectant widow. Now, was it tasteful? No. Was it mean-spirited? Yes. Because that same Saturday night, something else happened. An armed man tried to enter the very hall where President Trump and Melania and hundreds of journalists were gathered. The suspect since has been charged with attempted assassination of Trump. And suddenly Kimmel's joke about a glowing widow didn't seem like just a tasteless joke. Melania Trump went on X, and she didn't hold back. She called him a coward and demanded ABC take action against him. Enough is enough, she wrote. Then came the president himself on Truth Social, that's his social media platform. He demanded that Kimmel be fired immediately.
Example, as the First Lady of the United States pointed out this morning, just 2 days prior to the shooting, ABC's late night host Jimmy Kimmel disgustingly called First Lady Melania Trump an expectant widow. Who in their right minds says a wife would be glowing over the potential murder of her beloved husband? And having experienced what I did with the First Lady on Saturday night, I can tell you that she was anything but that.
Now, Jimmy Kimmel is not the kind of man who stays quiet. He walked out on Monday night, looked into the camera, and defended himself. The joke, he said, was obviously about their age difference. Trump is nearly 80, Melania is 56, and younger than Kimmel himself. And he clarified that his joke was not a call to assassination.
A call to fire me from our First Lady, Melania Trump, saying I should be fired because of a joke I made, again, 5 nights ago. It was a pretend roast. I said, our First Lady Melania is here. Look at her, so beautiful. Mrs. Trump, you have a glow like an expectant widow, which obviously was a joke about their age difference and the look of joy we see on her face every time they're together. It was a very light roast joke about the fact that he's almost 80 and she's younger than I am. It was not, by any stretch of the definition, a call to assassination, and they know that. I've been very vocal for many years speaking out against gun violence in particular.
Disney isn't firing him, not yet anyway, and Kimmel has plenty of high-profile support. George Clooney, one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces, who's also feuded with Trump, has publicly backed Kimmel, saying that his joke was just a joke. This latest controversy is a part of a longer pattern of tensions between Kimmel and Trump. Last year in September, Kimmel suggested that Charlie Kirk, the MAGA activist, was shot dead by someone from the MAGA gang. Trump weighed in and ABC suspended Kimmel, only to reinstate him less than a week later. Now, if Kimmel is guilty of bad jokes, Trump has not been above board either. He's the same man who's launched several public insults. In February, Trump posted a video on his Truth Social platform. It compared former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama to apes. Last month, upon hearing about the death of former FBI Director Robert Mueller, Trump wrote on Truth Social, and I'm quoting him here, "Good, I'm glad he's dead." Trump is not known to mince his words. Trump and section of the press, which he has labeled repeatedly as fake news, have been warring for quite some time now. He's called female reporters piggy and ugly. But the American media has also overstepped. In 2017, comedian Kathy Griffin posted with a fake severed head of Donald Trump. CNN had to take it down after facing immediate backlash. So here's the thing. Both sides have weaponized death as a punchline, and parts of the media have turned a president's physical harm into entertainment. Neither is defensible. Neither should be normalized. All freedoms come with responsibility. Propriety should not become a casualty at the altar of comedy. In Trump's battle with the left-wing press in America, the bar has hit a new low, the basement.
Okay, I'm going to weigh in on the story about President Trump and some of the jokes that's made about assassinations. I actually think this is very tasteless. I don't know why anybody would think that's funny. Whether it's the assassination of Charlie Kirk or the attempted assassination of President Trump, making jokes about that only makes people think that it's okay to attempt to do it. To me, that's not I don't think that's what it meant by freedom of speech, encouraging. Trump they try to impeach him for saying that people should, storm the Congress to protest the votes that he felt was miscalculated in 2020. And that guy went through a whole series of impeachments, and people went to jail as a result of that because they say he was inciting violence. But if a comedian goes online in the public sphere and, jokes about Melania Trump being a widow, or jokes about a man who actually was assassinated, Charlie Kirk, he gets 2 weeks off, paid vacation time off. What? Like, that to me is tasteless. I personally feel like as a society, it's one thing we disagree with each other on certain points or on certain ideologies and things of that nature, but we have to learn to tolerate each other and not to wish harm upon the next person. I may not necessarily agree with someone's way of living or their point of view when it comes to a political topic, but that doesn't mean that I'm encouraging or joking about the death of that person, that to me doesn't make sense to me, right? And I feel like you see it happen more so with people on the left, where they're making tasteless jokes that really doesn't align with any form of decency. It's like, really, that shouldn't be done. To me, I feel like not enough is being done to stop that. Yes, I agree there should be freedom of speech, but when somebody has had multiple assassination attempts on them, and then you go on a very, very public show with access to millions of people, who we all know there are some deranged people out there, and you start to joke about somebody being a widow, come on. That to me is tasteless. I don't support that. I think that we have a responsibility to speak up against that in the same ways that you may have some people say, hey, you shouldn't say this about this group of people because that's, anti-Semitism or whatever the case. And we have to have a social conscience to be mindful of what we say about a group of people. In the same way, we don't have a social conscience to be mindful about not encouraging people to be assassinated, like people in leadership to be assassinated, or not joking about that. To me, that's tasteless. I don't think it should be said, right? So I do think the brand should take some sort of measures to ensure that that is not the case. Now, again, whether that happens or not, probably unlikely. I'm not anti Kimmel. I don't really believe in his politics, but I do think a lot of these jokes are kind of more than jokes. I don't think he's a fan of Donald Trump. I think he probably dislikes him a lot. And Kathy Griffin, another one. To me, when she's holding his head up as the president, that's like, you should lose a job over something like that. That to me is not creative. That to me is dark and evil and gory. Like, what? Like, why would you do that? Like, I don't understand. Like, what could be funny about that? Like, it just seems dark and wicked, right? So to me, that can't be tolerated. In the same way, it's not tolerated for people to promote nudity and things like that on television, right? There's certain rules that prevent certain content from being displayed because you don't know who's watching that. Children could be watching that, right? So it's sending a message, and I don't think it's something that we should really get into. With that said, that's our show. I thank you guys for joining us today. I appreciate you stepping in, locking in, really, and supporting the show. If you're not already a subscribed member, I ask that you like and subscribe and you stay connected. But also, I ask that you weigh in, let your voice be heard. What did you think about some of the stories that was brought? We've heard about attempts made to get peace. We've heard about the UAE leaving the OPEC organization. We've heard a few other stories about, different events happening around the world. Whatever it is you think about this matter, ultimately is necessary to share, because your views are important, and maybe your point of view is something that can influence somebody else's point of view. So definitely let your voice be heard and stay connected to the show. And until I speak to you guys again, God bless you.